My name is Nathan Cole. I'm a plumber in Oil City, Pennsylvania. 15 years I've been cutting into people's pipes, and in 43 of those homes I found the same thing. A bright green line caked inside the water supply, same color, same chemical smell that burned the back of my throat. 43 homes, all within 6 blocks of the old Penn-grade refinery. Every resident told at some point that their blood work came back abnormal. I reported it. County, state, Senator Garrett Vogler's office. Nobody called me back. And then I found out why. The land where the refinery buried its waste was owned by the Vogler Family Trust. The senator wasn't ignoring the problem. He was the problem. This story took 3 years to put together. It cost me my business, most of my friendships, and a marriage that was already on thin ice. If you want to hear how a plumber took on a state senator and won, sort of, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Because what Senator Vogler said to me in the parking lot of the VFW hall is the kind of thing that sticks in your throat for a long time. And what his own aide did at that council meeting, I still can't believe it happened. Drop where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always read those. To tell this right, I need to take you back to the spring of 2021. A Tuesday morning, I was on my knees in a basement on Elm Street, and I had no idea what I was about to cut into. Oil City is one of those places you drive through on your way to somewhere else. About 10,000 people, give or take. Used to be more. The refineries kept this town alive for 100 years. And then, one by one, they closed. The Penn-grade facility on the south end shut down in 2009. But the buildings are still standing, rusted, fenced off. You can see the old smokestacks from the parking lot of the grocery store. There's a smell that hangs over the south end on humid days. Not strong, just this faint chemical sweetness that sits under everything, like the ground itself is sweating out whatever they buried in it. You stop noticing after a while. That's the thing about Oil City. You stop noticing a lot of things. I grew up here, went to Oil City High, graduated in 2004. My dad was a pipe fitter at one of the refineries before it closed. I got my plumbing license at 24 and started my own outfit, Cole Plumbing Services. Just me and a van and a phone number painted on the side. I did okay. The houses in Oil City are old. Old houses mean old pipes. Old pipes mean steady work. By the spring of 2021, I knew the insides of more basements in this town than anybody. I knew which houses had galvanized steel from the 40s and which ones had been refit with copper in the 80s. I knew the water pressure on Seneca Street ran low every August. I knew the smell of every kind of pipe corrosion there was. Or I thought I did. The job on Elm Street was routine. A woman on Elm Street, 71, lived alone, had a slow drain in her basement utility sink. I'd done work for her before. I got the drain cleared in about 20 minutes. But while I was down there, I noticed the main supply line had a section that looked off, discolored, not rust, something else, greenish. I told her I should probably replace that section while I was already here. When I cut the pipe, I almost dropped it. The inside was coated with this bright, vivid green layer, not like anything I'd seen in 15 years of cutting pipe. It wasn't rust. It wasn't mineral buildup. It had a chemical sharpness to it. Not strong enough to make you cough, but enough that you noticed. I held the section up to the basement light and just looked at it. "That normal?" she asked from the top of the stairs. Then, after a pause, "Because the water's been tasting funny since, I don't know, a long time. I kept meaning to ask someone." I told her I wasn't sure. I told her I'd look into it. And I replaced the pipe and went home. But I kept that section, put it in a Ziploc bag in my van. I'll come back to that Ziploc bag, because what I did next, or more honestly, what I didn't do for the next 2 months, is the part that still keeps me up. I should have tested that sample right away. I know that now. But I had jobs booked, I had bills, and honestly, I talked myself into thinking it was just some weird mineral deposit. Oil City's water has always had a taste to it. You grow up here, you get used to it. I thought maybe I'd call the county next week, and the county would send someone, and that would be the end of it. That's how it's supposed to work, right? You find a problem, you report it, adults handle it. But then I got a call about a job on Bissell Avenue, 4 blocks from the house on Elm Street. Different homeowner, different problem. Hot water heater replacement. And while I was down there, I saw the same thing. Same green line inside the pipes. Same chemical smell. I didn't say anything to the homeowner. I just cut a small sample and bagged it. 2 weeks later, a job on Center Street. Same green line, 3rd time. That was the week I heard about Iris Buckner. Iris was 28. She ran the children's reading program at the Oil City Library, the summer one, where kids came in and read books and got little prizes. Half the kids in town had been through that program. My neighbor's daughter went every Tuesday. Iris was the kind of person who, when you mentioned her name, people would just nod and say, "Yeah, she's good people." Not in a dramatic way, she just was. She had this laugh that carried. You could hear it from the back stacks when the kids did something funny during story time. That's how people described her, by the sound of her laugh. She'd been diagnosed with a rare form of leukemia the previous fall. By March of 2021, she was in a hospital in Pittsburgh. By April, she was gone, 28 years old. I went to the memorial service at the Methodist Church on Seneca Street. The whole town showed up, standing room only. And I remember standing in the back, looking around at all those faces and thinking, she was 28 years old. After the service, I was standing in the parking lot and this older guy walked up to me. He was fidgeting with a pack of cigarettes, turning it over and over in his hands, and he wouldn't quite look me in the eye. He said, "She's the fourth one in 3 years, all from the South End, all the blood kind." He said it like he'd been carrying it around and needed to put it somewhere. Then he shook his head and walked away. I went home that night and I pulled out those 3 Ziploc bags. And I lined them up on my kitchen counter and I looked at that green line in each one. I kept going back and forth, between the bags and the refrigerator, like I was going to eat something, like it was a normal night, but I couldn't open the refrigerator. I just kept looking at those bags. I didn't sleep that night. The next week, I went to see Iris's older brother, Orrin. He lived out on Route 8, about 15 minutes from town. He was an accountant, worked remotely for a firm in Erie. I didn't know him well. We'd talked maybe twice at community events. But I knocked on his door and I told him about the pipes, about the green line, about what the man in the parking lot had said. Orrin looked at me for a long time. He was very still, the kind of still that accountants get when they're running numbers in their head and the numbers are bad. Then he said, "You better come inside." That night, Orrin showed me something. He'd already started looking into it, on his own. After Iris's diagnosis, he'd pulled public health records. He'd filed FOIA requests. He had a spreadsheet on his laptop with the names and addresses of 11 people from the south end of Oil City who'd been diagnosed with blood cancers or kidney disorders in the last 6 years. 7 of them were dead. I sat in his kitchen and I stared at that spreadsheet and I asked him why he hadn't gone to anyone. He said, "I did. I went to Senator Vogler's district office in April of last year. I sat in the waiting room for 2 hours. A staffer came out, young woman, very polite, had a tablet, told me to send an email. Did you? 3 emails. Documented, time-stamped, 0 responses. I remember driving home that night and pulling over on Route 8 because my hands were shaking. I sat in my van for I don't know how long, 20 minutes, maybe more. The next day, I called the county health department. I described what I'd found in the pipes. I asked if anyone had tested the municipal water source near the old Pengrade site. The woman on the phone said she'd transfer me. I got a voicemail, left a message. Nobody called back. That was the first time Senator Vogler's name came up. But I didn't understand why it mattered yet. Not for another 3 months. So here's where I need to explain something about Garrett Vogler. Because if you're not from Western Pennsylvania, you might not know who he is. He's been the state senator for our district since 2014.
ran on economic development, bringing jobs back to Oil City. He had his face on billboards along Route 8, big smile, hard hat, standing in front of a construction site. The slogan underneath said, "Building our future together."
He was popular. I mean, genuinely popular. People liked him. He showed up at high school football games. He cut ribbons at new businesses. When the old refinery closed in 2009, he was the one who got the state to fund a remediation study, which, I'd later find out, was never completed. But at the time, people felt like he was fighting for us. You'd see his aide trailing behind him at events, young woman with a tablet, always taking notes, always nodding. She looked like she believed in him. That matters when you're trying to figure out if a man is real or not. The people closest to him seemed to think he was. I remember one morning that summer, before any of this got bad, I was replacing a faucet for a couple on Cherry Street. Simple job, 20 minutes. The husband made me coffee while I worked, and we talked about the pirates. And when I left, he said, "Thanks, Nate. You're the only guy who doesn't charge me for the conversation." I laughed. I drove to the next job. The sun was out and the radio was on, and I was just a plumber having a regular day. I think about that morning sometimes, what it felt like to not know. The first cruel thing Garrett Vogler ever said to me, he said it with a smile. It was at a community picnic at Justice Park, July 2021. I'd been making calls for about 2 months by then. County Health, State DEP, the EPA tip line. Nobody responded. I was getting frustrated. Vogler was at the picnic, shaking hands, eating a hot dog. I walked up to him and I said, polite as I could manage, "Senator, I've been trying to reach your office about a water quality concern on the South End. I've found evidence of contamination in residential plumbing." He looked at me, looked at my work shirt. It still had the Cole Plumbing logo on it. And he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Son, I appreciate your concern, but the last thing this town needs is another man with a wrench telling people their water's going to kill them. You keep fixing pipes. Leave the science to the scientists." He said it loud enough that 4 or 5 people around us heard it, and they laughed, a couple of them. Not mean, exactly, more like nervous. Like they wanted to believe the senator over the plumber. And the thing I'm ashamed of, the part I don't like admitting, is that for a second, I agreed with him. For maybe 5 seconds, standing there in the July sun with hot dog smoke in the air and people laughing, I felt like a fool. Like maybe I was the problem. A plumber with a Ziploc bag and a theory. Who was I to question the guy with the billboard? That shame, it sat right next to the rage, and I couldn't tell which one was winning. You ever been in a room where everyone knows something is wrong, but nobody will say it because saying it makes it real? That's what Oil City felt like that summer. I could see it in the way people looked at me after that picnic. Not hostile, just careful. Like I was the guy who might ruin everything by saying the thing nobody wanted said. I want to stop here and ask you something. Have you ever been the only person in your life who saw what was really happening and had everyone around you act like you were the problem for seeing it? If that's ever been you, tell me about it in the comments. Because that summer, that's exactly where I was. And it's the loneliest feeling in the world. But I was about to find something that would make everything I'd seen so far look small. Because the green line in those pipes wasn't coming from where I thought it was. By August of 2021, I had 9 pipe samples, all from the South End, all with the same green deposit. I needed them tested, properly, by a real lab. The problem was cost. An environmental lab analysis runs about $350 per sample. I had 9 samples and about $1,400 in my checking account that wasn't already spoken for. So I picked 3, the worst-looking ones, and I sent them to a lab in Pittsburgh, Environmental Diagnostics Associates, a place that does water and soil testing for construction companies and municipalities. The results came back on September 3rd, 2021. I was sitting in my van in the parking lot of the True Value hardware store when I opened the email on my phone. The screen was cracked so bad I had to tilt it to read. All 3 samples contained elevated levels of trichloroethylene, TCE, and something called perfluorooctanoic acid, PFOA.
both of them well above EPA action levels. The TCE reading in one sample was 11 times the federal limit.
I sat there, in the van, in the parking lot, with the engine off and the windows up. I read it again, 11 times. I put the phone on the dashboard and I just stared at the steering wheel. I think I said something out loud. I don't remember what. I remember my mouth was dry and I felt like the parking lot was tilting, just slightly, like the ground had shifted under me. I picked up the phone and tried to call Cheryl. I got 3 words in. The results came, and then I couldn't finish the sentence. She said, "Nathan? Nathan, what's wrong?" I told her I'd call her back. Poison. That's what it was. The word I'd been avoiding. I drove to Warren's house. I showed him the report. He sat at his kitchen table and read it twice. Didn't speak. Read it a 3rd time. Then he lined up a pencil next to the paper, perfectly parallel to the edge. I'll never forget that, the way he straightened that pencil, and said, "The data is unambiguous. We need all 9 tested. I can't afford it." He opened his checkbook. Warren paid for the remaining 6 tests. $2,100 out of his own pocket. I told him I'd pay him back. He said, "My sister is dead. I don't want your money." I need to tell you what I know now, sitting here recording this, that I didn't know then. The man I was about to go after, the one I thought was responsible, wasn't the one I should have been looking at. But I'll get to that. While we waited for the rest of the results, I started doing something I probably should have done sooner. I started looking into the old Pengrade site, specifically the remediation, or lack of it. The state had funded a study in 2010, right after the closure. Senator Vogler had announced it himself, press conference and everything. "We will not rest until this site is clean." But when I went looking for the study's results, I couldn't find them. Not online, not in the library's public records section. I called the state DEP and asked for the remediation report on the Pengrade Oil City facility. The woman I spoke to, she was nice about it, said the study had been suspended pending additional review. She said it had been in that status since 2013, 8 years. A study that was supposed to take 2 years had been sitting in bureaucratic limbo for 8. I didn't know why yet, but I was starting to notice a pattern. Every time I looked into the contamination, the trail led back to a door that had been quietly closed. Not locked, just closed. Like somebody had gone through before me and gently pushed every door shut. I need to pause here. The senator told me to leave the science to the scientists. But what happens when the scientists never show up? What happens when the study that was supposed to protect your town gets buried in a filing cabinet? Would you keep digging? Or would you listen to the man with the hard hat and the billboard? Drop your answer in the comments. Because what I did next, I still don't know if it was brave or stupid. The refinery's site manager, a guy named Warren Kessler who'd been hired to oversee the shutdown and maintenance, he was about to become the person I was most wrong about in this entire story. I went after Warren Kessler first. It made sense. He was the site manager. He was the one responsible for the property. If waste had been improperly disposed of, he was the obvious suspect. I spent 2 weeks looking into Kessler. I drove past the refinery site at different times of day. I pulled his name from county records. He'd been hired as the site caretaker in 2010, right when the remediation study started. Warren and I even tracked some permit filings that had his signature on them. And then I talked to him. I knocked on the door of his office, a small trailer parked just inside the refinery fence. He answered the door in work boots and a flannel shirt. He was maybe 60, gray hair, tired looking. The kind of tired that isn't about sleep. I told him who I was. I told him about the green line, about the lab results. He listened. He didn't interrupt. He sat there with his hands flat on the desk, and at one point he rubbed his eyes and said, "You know how long I've been out here? 6 years. 6 years in this trailer, watching that fence rust." He said it to nobody in particular. Then he looked at me. "You think I don't know about this?" He walked back inside and came out with a file folder. Thick, maybe 40 pages. He handed it to me and said, "I've been sending these to the senator's office since 2015. Water monitoring reports, soil samples, every quarter like they asked.
Nobody ever responds. I looked at the folder. Inside were copies of contamination monitoring reports, with cover letters addressed to the office of State Senator Garrett Vogler. You sent these?
Every one. Certified mail. I've got the receipts. He paused. You know what the worst part is? I keep testing. Every quarter. Because that's the job. And every quarter I send the results, and every quarter it's like putting a letter in a hole in the ground. I stood there, holding that folder, and I felt like an idiot. I'd spent 2 weeks chasing the wrong man. Kessler wasn't the cover-up. Kessler was the one who'd been trying to sound the alarm. And the senator's office had been receiving those reports, receiving proof that the contamination was ongoing and getting worse for 6 years. Kessler looked at me and said, "You know who owns that land, right? The 7 acres on the south side where they buried the processing waste?" I said I didn't. "Look up the Vogler Family Trust. It's been theirs since '87. I drove home. I pulled up the Venango County property records online, and there it was, 7.2 acres, parcel number 45-018-0132, registered to the Vogler Family Trust. Garrett Vogler, trustee. The senator wasn't just ignoring the contamination reports, he had a financial reason to ignore them. The waste was on his family's land. If the contamination was officially acknowledged, the trust would be liable. Cleanup costs, lawsuits, everything. Now, let me be clear about what I'm saying. I'm not saying Garrett Vogler decided to let people die for money. I'm saying he received reports, he received data, he knew the water was contaminated, and he made a choice, or a series of choices over years, to do nothing. Because doing something meant destroying his family's finances and his political career at the same time. And the town let him. That's the part that still gets me. People knew things weren't right. The water tasted different. People were getting sick. But Vogler was the guy who was going to save Oil City. He was the billboard, the ribbon cutter, the hard hat and the handshake. And nobody wanted to be the one to say the emperor had no clothes. I want to ask you something here, because this is where it gets complicated. Is Vogler a monster? Or is he just a man who made the calculation that protecting a whole town's economy was worth a few people getting sick? That's how he'd frame it, I think. That's how a lot of people framed it. Think about that. Because a couple weeks after I got the property records, he found me. And what he said still keeps me up at night. I ran into Vogler outside the post office. He saw me and walked over. This time, he wasn't smiling. He leaned close and said, "I hear you've been visiting the refinery site. I hear you've been talking to Warren." I said, "I have." He looked at me, and this is the line I still hear at night. He said, "Nathan, be careful. You start telling people their water's killing them. Those people stop drinking the water. They stop drinking the water, property values drop. Property values drop, this town dies. You want to be the man who killed Oil City? Because that's what they'll call you. Not a hero. The man who killed the town." He said it like he was doing me a favor, like he was looking out for me. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, is that I almost believed him. For about 3 seconds, standing there in the October sun, I thought, maybe he's right. Maybe I should shut up. Then I thought about Iris Buckner, 28 years old, reading books to kids at the library, dead. Orrin was the one who found the financial connection. I'm not an accountant. I wouldn't have known where to look, but Orrin did. It was November by then. The trees along Route 8 were bare, and the sky had that flat, gray Pennsylvania look that doesn't let up until April. I was driving to Orrin's house with the heater rattling in my van, and I remember thinking, we've been at this for 6 months now. 6 months since that first pipe on Elm Street. Half a year of my life. Orrin had pulled the tax records for the Vogler Family Trust going back to 2009. What he found was, I don't even know how to describe it. Systematic. That's the word. Starting in 2010, the trust had been receiving annual payments from a company called Allegheny Creek Environmental Services. The payments ranged from $14,000 to $26,000 a year.
Orrin cross-referenced the company and found that Allegheny Creek was the contractor hired by the state to perform the remediation study, the study that had been suspended since 2013. So, here's what was happening. The state hired Allegheny Creek to clean up the Pengrade site. Allegheny Creek was paying the Vogler Trust for, the records listed it as site access and land use agreements. Essentially, rent. Rent to access land they were supposed to be cleaning, and the trust was collecting that rent while the study sat unfinished in a drawer. The cleanup never happened because the cleanup being incomplete was profitable. How much total? I asked Orrin. He'd calculated it. $193,400 since 2010. I can show you the year by year. 11 years of payments, and every year those payments kept coming. The contamination kept spreading, and people kept getting sick. And Iris Buckner kept reading books to children and not knowing that the water she drank every day was slowly killing her. He got paid to poison them. That's what it was. Strip away the trust documents and the land use agreements and the certified mail receipts, and that's what was left. Orrin had something else. He'd pulled Vogler's campaign finance reports. Allegheny Creek Environmental had also donated to his re-election campaigns. Twice. Not huge amounts. $5,000 here, $5,000 there. But enough that the relationship was visible. So the company pays the trust for land access, donates to his campaigns, and the study never gets completed, Orrin said. He was making coffee while he talked, pouring it with the same precision he used for everything. Like measuring was the only thing keeping him together. And nobody asks why. Nobody asked because nobody wanted the answer. Orrin set my cup down and sat across from me. For a second, we just looked at each other. Two guys at a kitchen table with a stack of tax records and a pot of coffee, trying to take down a state senator. He almost smiled. I almost smiled. It was absurd. It was completely, impossibly absurd. And then the moment passed, and we went back to the spreadsheets. That was also the week my van got vandalized. I came out one morning and someone had spray-painted "Troublemaker" across the driver's side in red paint. No cameras in my neighborhood, no witnesses. I spent 45 minutes scrubbing it off with paint thinner before I went to work. 2 days later, my parts supplier, a guy I'd been buying from for 12 years, called and said he couldn't fill my next order. Inventory issues. He sounded uncomfortable. I asked him if someone had talked to him. He said, "Nathan, I'm just telling you about the inventory." I didn't push it. I found another supplier in Meadville, but I understood the message. We had the evidence. We had the names. And none of it mattered if the town wouldn't let us speak. Meanwhile, Orrin and I kept working. We had the pipe samples. We had the lab results. We had the property records. We had the contamination reports that Kessler had sent. We had the financial trail. And we had the names of 11 people, 7 dead, 4 still fighting cancer, who all lived within 6 blocks of the refinery. What we didn't have was a platform. Nobody in Oil City was going to listen to a plumber and an accountant. We needed something public, something undeniable. And then in January of 2022, we got it. The Oil City Town Council announced a public hearing on proposed water infrastructure improvements. Senator Vogler was scheduled to attend. He was going to present his new initiative, a $3 million upgrade to the South End water mains. And here's the part that Orrin pointed out, the part that made me put my coffee down and just stare at him. The funding for Vogler's Clean Water Initiative came from a state environmental remediation grant, the same kind of grant that was supposed to fund the cleanup of the Pengrade site. He'd built his political legacy on the problem he caused. His whole Clean Water, Clean Future platform was funded by the crisis he was hiding. He was going to stand up in front of the whole town and talk about clean water in the same building where I was going to show them what was inside their pipes. January 26th. We had 6 weeks. Like and subscribe right now, because what happened in that room is something I still can't fully explain. I need to tell you, I almost didn't go through with it. I'm being honest. The night before that hearing, I sat on my couch and I thought about everything I'd lose.
My business was already struggling. People were avoiding me. My wife, Cheryl, we'd been having problems for a while, and this whole thing had made it worse. She wasn't against me exactly. She just didn't understand why I couldn't leave it alone. I called Orrin that night. I said, "Are we sure about this?" He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Iris would have been 29 last week." That was the only answer I needed. The town council meeting was January 26th, 2022. The venue was the community room at the Oil City Civic Center. Folding chairs, a long table at the front for the council members, a podium with a microphone, the kind of room where you could hear someone cough from the back row. The fluorescent lights had that low buzz to them, and somebody had made coffee in the back. The burnt kind, the kind that's been sitting too long. I could smell it from the door. I got there early, sat in my car with the box in the trunk for about 15 minutes.
The box. Inside it were 9 pipe samples in labeled bags, 6 lab reports, Warren Kessler's contamination monitoring folder, the property records for the Vogler Trust, and a printed timeline Orrin had put together showing the payments and the cancer diagnoses side by side. Everything was in that box. A year of my life, sealed in plastic bags and manila folders. Knowing something is one thing. Saying it out loud in a room full of people who don't want to hear it, that's something else entirely. I have to ask you, if you had that box in your trunk, and you knew that opening it would blow up every relationship in your town, but you also knew that not opening it meant more people might die, would you walk in that door? Be honest, would you? I was walking toward the entrance when Vogler came out of the side door. He'd been smoking. I could smell it. He saw me and stopped. Looked at me, then at the box under my arm, and he walked over. Close, casual, like we were old friends running into each other. He said, "Nathan, I want you to listen to me. If you go in there tonight and you make a scene, I want you to think about what happens to your wife. Cheryl, right? She works at the school. Small town, people talk." He smiled. That same smile from the picnic. "I'm not threatening you, I'm just saying, be smart. For her sake. Some doors, once you open them, you can't close them again." He patted me on the arm and walked inside. I stood there. My hands were shaking. Not from fear exactly, from the fact that he'd said Cheryl's name. He knew her name. He'd used it like a tool. And that was the moment I stopped being scared and started being certain. Because a man who threatens your wife to protect himself, that's not a public servant. That's a man with something to hide. And hiding it is the only thing he has left. The meeting was packed, maybe 150 people. I recognized most of them. These were my customers, my neighbors, the people I'd been fixing pipes for since I was 24. I saw a woman in the third row. I'd replaced her water heater 2 years ago. She waved. She had no idea. And most of them didn't know why I was there. Senator Vogler was already at the front. Blue suit, flag pin. He was talking to the council president, smiling, relaxed, like it was just another Tuesday night. I sat in the back row. The box was under my chair. There is something I learned in the months before that meeting. Silence isn't empty. In a town like Oil City, silence has weight to it. It has agreements built into it. When people don't talk about something for long enough, the not talking becomes the thing. It becomes its own structure. And to break it, you don't just need facts. You need to be willing to tear down a thing that everyone has quietly agreed to maintain. I knew that walking up to that podium meant tearing down the agreement, not just between me and Vogler, between the whole town and itself. The meeting started at 7. Council business first. Budget items, road repairs. 40 minutes of the kind of stuff that makes you wish you'd brought a book. Then the council president introduced Senator Vogler. He walked to the podium. The room gave him polite applause. Some people genuinely admired him. I could see it in their faces. He talked for about 12 minutes. The water main upgrade, the funding he'd secured, the timeline. He used the phrase, investing in our community's future, twice. He was good at this. The performance of caring. I'll give him that. When the council president asked if there were any public comments, I stood up.
The chair scraped against the floor and a few people turned around. Vogler saw me and his jaw tightened, just slightly, but I saw it. "My name is Nathan Cole. I'm a licensed plumber. I've served this community for 15 years. I was holding the box. My hands were steady. That surprised me. "I have something to present to the council. It's regarding the water quality on the south end." I walked up to the front table. I set the box down, and I started. I didn't yell. I didn't give a speech. I just laid it out, one piece at a time, the way you lay out tools before a job. The order matters, but in the moment you're not thinking about order, you're just working. I started with the pipes. I opened each bag and set them on the table. 9 sections of pipe with that bright green line running through the inside. Under the fluorescent lights, the color was almost electric. People in the first 2 rows leaned forward. I fumbled with the 4th bag, my fingers were slippery, and it took me a second to get it open. Nobody said anything, they just watched. Then the lab results, 6 pages, TCE and PFOA levels. I read the numbers out loud. 11 times the federal limit in the sample from 247 Elm Street, 8.4 times the limit from 310 Bissell Avenue, 7.1 from 118 Center Street.
Then the contamination monitoring reports. Warren Kessler's folder. 37 quarterly reports, every one addressed to the office of State Senator Garrett Vogler. Every one documenting ongoing contamination from the old Pengrade site, starting in 2015. I looked at Vogler. I could feel my pulse in my throat. And for a half second, this is strange to say, I felt something I didn't expect. Not rage, something closer to exhaustion. Like I was looking at a man who had been running from the same thing I'd been running toward, and we'd both ended up in this fluorescent room with folding chairs and burnt coffee and nowhere left to go. "Senator, your office received 37 reports over 6 years documenting contamination levels in the soil and groundwater adjacent to the old refinery. Every single report was received. I have the certified mail receipts." I held up the receipt copies. "Your office acknowledged receipt in writing on 4 occasions. You knew." The room was quiet. Not the quiet of boredom, the quiet of 150 people holding their breath. Then the property records. I put the county filing on the table. The 7-acre parcel where the processing waste was buried, parcel 45-018-0132, is owned by the Vogler Family Trust. You are the trustee. Someone in the middle of the room said, "What?" It was starting. The thing that happens when truth enters a room that's been built on silence. People start looking at each other. They start doing the math. Then the timeline. Orrin's spreadsheet. I handed copies to each council member. 11 names, 7 dead, 4 still fighting. Ages, diagnoses, addresses, all within 6 blocks of the refinery, all drawing water from the same source. My voice cracked on her name. I didn't plan that. "Iris Buckner," I said, 28 years old, ran the children's reading program at the library. Diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia in October 2020. Died April 14, 2021. She lived on Bissell Avenue, 3 blocks from the refinery. Her water pipes had the same green line as every other house I tested. Somewhere behind me I heard a woman start crying quietly. 37 reports, 7 dead, 1 senator. Vogler stood up. He was pale. He gripped the edge of the table and said, This is irresponsible. You're a plumber, not a scientist. You're scaring people with incomplete data and conspiracy theories." "Senator," I said, "your own site manager sent you the data 37 times. And then something happened that I did not plan, that I could not have planned." A man in the 3rd row stood up. Tom Flieger, 62 years old, retired. I'd fixed his kitchen sink in 2019. He stood up and he said, "My wife Gloria had kidney cancer. She died in 2018. We lived on Reed Street our whole lives." Then a woman stood up. Then another man. Then someone from the back. One at a time. They said their names. They said their addresses. They said what had happened to them or to someone they loved. Vogler's aide, the young woman I'd seen at the picnic and at his events, always at his side, always nodding, always writing on that tablet,
was standing off to the side. She was shaking. She looked at the senator and said, "You told me the reports were inconclusive. You told me they were being reviewed." Vogler said, "Sit down. That's not... You told me to file them and not respond." The room erupted. And then, this is the part I think about most. Vogler did something unexpected. He sat down. He didn't run. He didn't argue. He sat down in his chair and he put his face in his hands. Just for a moment. And when he looked up, his eyes were wet. Not performing. Genuinely. Like the weight of 9 years had just landed on him all at once. It lasted about 2 seconds. Then the mask came back. He stood up and said, "I have served this community faithfully for 8 years, and I will not be ambushed by a man who fixes toilets for a living." But it was over. Everyone in that room had heard the numbers. They'd seen the green lines in those pipes. They'd heard the names. He looked at me one last time before he left, and for half a second I saw it. Not anger, fear. The fear of a man who knows that the thing he built his whole career on is about to collapse. His water glass was still on the table, knocked over. Nobody cleaned it up. What happened after that meeting didn't come in order. That's what nobody tells you about aftermath. It doesn't arrange itself. It hits you from every direction at once. The reporter from the Venango County Observer called me at 6 the next morning. Before I'd finished my coffee, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette was on the line. By the end of the week, 2 state news crews were parked on Franklin Street, while my neighbor was crossing the street to avoid me.
The DEP reopened the investigation. Their report confirmed contamination levels up to 14 times the EPA limit. 12 years it had been in the water supply. Iris Buckner was 16 when it started. Vogler resigned on Valentine's Day. 3-paragraph statement. Last sentence. "I have always acted in the best interest of my constituents." I read it in my van and laughed. In April, the state attorney general opened a criminal investigation. In June, Vogler was indicted. Criminal negligence, obstruction, fraud, failure to report. He pled not guilty. The trial still hasn't happened. The Superfund cleanup started. Orrin and I filed a civil complaint on behalf of 31 households, and the town was angry. Not all at Vogler. Some of them were angry at me. "You ruined the senator. Property values are going to tank." I heard those things from people I'd worked for. Truth doesn't make you popular. It makes you necessary. A guy I'd known since high school, we played on the same baseball team in 10th grade, walked past me at the gas station and didn't say a word. Just looked through me, like I wasn't there. My marriage didn't survive it. Cheryl and I separated in March of 2022. I don't blame her. I don't blame her for any of it. The thing about spending a year obsessed with a contamination case is that you stop being present for everything else. She told me once, this was near the end, "Nathan, I believe you. I've always believed you, but I can't live in a house that's also a war room." She was right. The kitchen table had been covered in documents for months. I was making calls at midnight. I was irritable and distracted, and not the person she married. We signed the papers in June. We're civil. It's not hostile, but it's done. Cole Plumbing didn't survive either. I lost about 60% of my customers. Not because they thought I was wrong, because I was the reminder. I sold the van. I work for a plumbing outfit in Franklin now. 20-minute commute, regular paycheck. I don't mind it. About a week after I started the new job, I was driving home on Route 8. It was late, past 7, dark already, and I pulled over. I don't know why. There was nothing wrong with the truck. I just pulled over and sat there with the engine running and my hands on the wheel, and it hit me. All of it. Not the hearing, not the indictment, just Iris. Orrin's face when he opened his checkbook. Cheryl's voice saying, "I can't live in a war room." The guy at the gas station who looked through me. All of it at once. Like a year of weight just fell. I sat there for a long time. I don't know how long. I couldn't see the road properly. When I finally drove home, I left the radio off. I didn't want noise. I just wanted to be still. Orrin and I still talk every couple of weeks. He calls on Sunday mornings. We don't always talk about the case. Sometimes we talk about nothing. Football, the weather. He told me once that Iris used to make French toast every Sunday morning.
and that he still can't eat it. It's been about a year since that town council meeting. I'm recording this in February 2023. I live in a one-bedroom apartment on 12th Street now. Clean, quiet, a coffee maker, and a window that faces east. Most mornings I wake up around 6. I make coffee. I sit at a small table, no documents on it, and I don't check my phone. That's new. Vogler is awaiting trial. The civil suit is in discovery. It's going to take years. Iris Buckner's name is on a memorial plaque at the Oil City Library. Orrin paid for it. It's small, brass. It says her name and the years she lived. And she loved books, and she loved this town. If you stayed through this whole thing, I want to say something. This was the hardest thing I've ever talked about. Harder than going through it. Because when you're in it, you just move. It's only after, sitting here, telling it out loud, that you feel all of it at once. If this story meant something to you, hit that like button. Share it. Subscribe if you haven't. Because there are other towns, like Oil City, other water that nobody's testing, other senators with family trusts and certified mail they pretend they never received. These stories need to be heard. Who's the person in your community that everyone knows about but nobody talks about? The one whose reputation protects them from questions nobody's willing to ask. I read every single comment. Tell me. I'm Nathan Cole, 39, plumber, Oil City, Pennsylvania. This morning I made my coffee and I drank it straight from the tap. Filtered now. Clean. I didn't think about it, I just drank it. That's the victory. Small, quiet. Enough.